Hello, mystical, magical people. Welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. If this is your first episode that you're listening in on, we have such a special treat today. We have a guest in the parlor. I'm your host, Jenny, aka Phantasma Witch. Let's meet our lovely guest today.
Hi, so I'm Paula Victoria. I am a LA-based palmist, palm reader, however you prefer to say that. I have been reading palms for as long as I can remember. And I'm also an interior designer, so I come at palmistry with a design and, art-focused background, and just really open-minded background. I love reading creatives and work with them daily in all senses of my life. So it's really a pleasure to be able to connect with you, Jenny, and learn about how you read poems too. So
Yes, I'm so excited. And I don't know a whole lot of other palm readers, which is one of the reasons why I was like, I gotta get Paula
same.
on the podcast because I really want people to,
Same, same.
I want people to like hear different backgrounds and hear like how different and versatile the same exact thing can be and how wildly different it is. And I also really
Mhm.
love that you come from an artistic background as well. Like I do, because it does add a nice creative flair that we can pull from our creative knowledge and insights and apply it in this intuitive way. So, I know you said that you've been reading palms for a really long time. Could you kind of tell us, like, how long have you been reading palms?
Right. So it's interesting when people ask for a bio or ask, what is your experience in palmistry? It on writing, it sounds so strange to say 20 plus years. But it's been since I was a little girl in my grandmother's garden. And so when you think about it in terms of time, that's the case. But palmistry is a practice, right? Like any practice, it ebbs and flows. And it's not like consistently for those 20 years I've been reading bunch of poems nonstop. It's been learning palmistry, understanding the sentimental value of it to me, the ancestral connection it has with me. But yeah, since I was a little girl, my grandmother had a garden. She raised me in Texas, and we're originally from the Philippines. And our family learned after she passed that she learned from a woman in Manila in their neighborhood. She was sort of like a word of mouth, probably like you and I would be word of mouth for, oh, I know this one palm reader or Phantasma Witch is wonderful. Like you should get her to come to your house party. It was sort of like that. So it's this wonderful roundabout situation where now her granddaughter does something similar, right? But she
Wow.
learned from this woman that was a word of mouth, would come to the house and read everyone's fortunes. And we learned that she called on her way more than the family knew. My mom's oldest sister said after she passed, oh, actually, she was over quite a lot, not only when the family was all over. And so we believe that she learned from her and not
Mm.
maybe sit down as a practice to learn with her, but enough, called on her enough for guidance to understand it and trust it as a practice. And so when we were gardening growing up, and she also taught me Filipino
Mm.
spirituality is very nature based. And so, even though she was a very superstitious Catholic, we still had this very strong background of being very connected with nature and connected with the garden and talking with our plants and singing to our plants. And so, we would do a lot of that. And in between all of that, she would also ask me about the lines on our hand and like, oh,
Mm.
what do you like? Do you notice any changes and all of that? And so, it kickstarted from there. And then came the sitting in the New Age section at Barnes and Noble and Googling in the early days of the internet, things that I could learn and getting little books when I could find them. But it's hard. It's hard to find
Yeah.
books. It was historically hard. It's still kind of hard. I actually went to a bookstore the other day and there's books about really niche magical practices in a bookstore that's not catering towards that audience, but then there's maybe one palmistry book. So
Yeah.
it's really shocking to me that, a practice that's so readily available on your hands is not really readily available to learn. And it should be more. It should be more available, but that's kind of like a long roundabout of how long I've been practicing and the journey of how I learned more about it. It was at first with my grandmother, that connection with her, and then this process of self-taught and self-practice. Yep.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. I love that for you, palmistry has this deep ancestral connection, and that you think of your family and that you think of your grandma and how she used to
Do.
ask you these questions about your hands. That's beautiful. And that it really sparked this like inspiration in you to go and do your own research and to really dive deeper into it. Um, for me, my background's not as like family based. Mine was definitely more like I was into doing a lot of these things kind of naturally as a kid and then finding out that they had a name. So for listeners of the
Oh,
podcast,
wow.
yeah, so for listeners of the podcast,
That's fascinating.
they may know that like I got into tarot because I was reading cards, like playing cards, and didn't realize until my mom said, "Oh, this is like tarot," and then she gave me my deck. But
That's incredible.
for palmistry, I had seen it in films, and I was always really fascinated with the idea of it because I really wanted to figure out how to do it. And honestly, I used to go to thrift stores a lot. And one time I went to like a Goodwill with my mom, and I found one of those really cheap, flimsy, tiny paperback books on palmistry there. And so I grabbed that.
As you
Sneakily
do.
bought it. Yes, yes. And that was like my first intro into palmistry. And then another time I went to the thrift store and I found yet another book on divination, and it had a section on palmistry. And it was always something that I did just for me, just for fun, just to look at my
Right.
own hands, and never really took it seriously until many years later when I got very serious about my tarot reading and I wanted to really dive deeper back into these different practices that I was really into as a kid. And one of the things that came up was like, I really want to get into palmistry. And so I actually decided to take a class. And that's when I bought all the research books. And this was like back in, oh my gosh, I want to say like somewhere between 2018 and 2020. It's been a while, but somewhere within that point of time, I was just
Mhm.
like, let's get back into things like this. And so I'm curious. So you learned a little from, your family, and you did your own research in books. Did you
Mhm.
also take any classes, or are you just like completely self-taught, like bookworm?
Bookworm. I
Yeah.
haven't taken any classes, and it's on purpose at this point. I think after a while, when I came back to it, and I practiced again for myself, and every now and then but most of my friends growing up don't know, like college, high school friends, don't really even know that I read palms, like that I,
Mm.
was into palmistry, and so a lot of my best friends were a little shocked that I got into this, and they were like, that makes sense because I was always like the Harry Potter kid. And fantasy book reader, all of that. So it was very self-taught. It was not really surprising for me to just have my nose in a book growing up. I like read at recess. I like was not a playground person. I was just like, what's the latest thing? The book fairs. I was all about it.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yes.
when I got back into yeah. When I got back into it, then I was like, well, now I can look for really serious books. Now I'm ready. Now
Mm.
I know what I can get into. And I didn't want to, I realized that everyone practices differently. Like every practice, everyone has their own way of practicing. And I didn't want to take a class because and usually I would want to practice with someone, like have some kind of tutor, but I wanted this to be my own, and I wanted to find my own journey in it and make it personally what works for me. And at the time, I didn't really see palmistry as an intuitive practice. I saw it as more of maybe more of a science than an art, right? Because it's people call it both. And
Mhm.
it was more of a study, literally, of the lines, because I didn't want to trust and rely so much on intuition since I was learning, I'm very skeptical. So, then as time went on and I learned my practice more and I met with more people, I started to realize and to trust more in that intuition and realize like this is an intuitive practice. This is both an art and a science. And you can learn all you want from books, you can learn all you want from a teacher, but no matter what, like with any practice, you're going to find what works best for you. So I think now after some time of doing many readings and being in this practice, it would be really fun to take a class, right? Like, I think just to see other perspectives and understand maybe there's something I don't know, or maybe there's something that I do that someone else doesn't know, like this exchange now. I feel like there's so many little things just from reading so many people, you start to see patterns and you start to see
Yes.
maybe something that you read in a book is not what fits people now because maybe the
Yeah.
book is a little dated. There's a lot of really, I don't know if you found this, but a lot of really old, out of date books that,
Yep.
they teach some basic things, but there's a lot of maybe like borderline sexist language or
100%.
inappropriate racist
Yes.
comments. And so maybe just some inappropriate ways things are worded. And so you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt. And that goes for anyone that's trying to learn, if you're listening now. When you find books, they are from, look at what from when they're from. Think of it in the
Yes.
context and take from it what makes sense because there's a lot of things that you can learn in there that are not applicable now or appropriate now. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's interesting. You got
It
to find the
really
right.
is. Yes, yes. And I've
Yeah.
taught palmistry classes, and I always start my class with a key section where before I begin teaching anything, I tell people, hey, palmistry is going to be different all over the world. And every book is going to be completely different. And a lot of books are going to be really outdated in their points of view, in the way that they're taught, in the ideas and beliefs, and that you have to be able to recognize, okay, this was written back in like if it's a book from, oh my gosh, if it's a book from the Victorian era, buckle up because it is going to be really disgusting. Like there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that makes its way in, and luckily there are a couple of more modern books that aren't as bad, that aren't as racist, and
Hmm.
there's still, though, that very heavy gender and sexist way of talking
Hmm.
about the poems and way of reading. And so
Yes.
I always tell my students, like, what you're hearing from me is my version of palm reading. I've learned from my teacher. I have
Yep.
learned from many, many, many different books. I've done my own practice, and this is now kind of it became my own way of doing things, of saying, okay,
Right.
I read these books. This totally resonates with me personally, and I also find that it seems to resonate with my sitters. And then the things that don't resonate with me or don't resonate with the sitter, I know to admit and be like, okay, well, that's not working. And so it definitely is this exploration process of seeing what clicks, seeing what doesn't, seeing what really works for you and your own personal practice. And I think this is one of the coolest things about palmistry is that unlike tarot, where tarot has a guidebook and tarot has a, very set way of these are the archetypes, these are the symbols, this is what they symbolically represent and how to read them. And of course, you can always kind of bend those to depending on the reading. But palmistry, because there's so many different versions from all over the world, and when I say all over the world, I'm really saying all over the world from way, 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 way back in history. And so, because of that, you're going to have so many different opinions on how to read things. And it's funny because sometimes I'm on TikTok and I will have a palm reader who's like from China pop up. And the way that he reads palms, I would not read palms that way, but it's so cool to watch somebody from
It's
a
very different Chinese
it's
palmistry.
so different. And it's so interesting because
Hmm.
I will never turn around and be like, this person doesn't know what they're doing. It's like, no, this person knows how to read for them in a way that works for them and their clients. And that's awesome. And
Hmm.
it's so wild. And so I'll even tell clients that sit down with me, go get read by many, many different palm readers if you can find them, because you're going to get a different
Yes.
style of reading every single time. So I'm curious, when it
Hmm.
comes to your style of palm reading, well, I guess first I'll ask, have you ever had your palm read by someone else? And do you find that you have a particular way of reading that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, so I have had my palm read by other people. I would say the first outside of the garden with my grandmother, which, she was not a palm reader, so I wouldn't say it was like a full reading. It was more of a, like you're gonna marry rich kind of reading, very like anti-reading. Um, but what would be the Renaissance Festival? I grew up in Texas, and the Texas Renaissance Festival is huge. It's massive, and so I would go as dress up in, my elf ears and my little Renaissance dress as like this
Yes.
little book reader kid. And I would go and like and I'd be like, oh, I really want to get my palm read, and I would use my allowance, and I would like go get tarot readings and palm readings, and it was like my treat every year, every Renaissance season. And so I got a lot of readings at the Renaissance Festival, and that was sort of like my first taste of what it would be like to be a reader and exposure to that world. Then at growing up, I lived in New York for 10 years, so there's readers all over the place. Like
Mhm.
sometimes like they're like, second floor walk up readings, like you have friends who are visiting and you want to go. And so I over time just explored. And when I would travel, like if like I was in Salem in high school and I got a reading in Salem. And so I don't remember specifically any huge differences because I feel like oftentimes in palm readings, my experience, and I guess this has affected the way I read, my experience is that you hear things in the reading and you don't know where they come from. And
Mhm.
or they're fatalistic in nature,
Mm.
and you don't know how to take it when you leave from the reading. And so I think a lot of palm readers, and I feel like you also would agree, correct me if I'm wrong, are trying to sort of correct this fatalistic way of reading,
Yes.
and where you're learning, the first question I get when people are scared of reading is, please don't tell me when I'm going to die, or are you going to tell
Same.
me something
Yep.
along those lines? And I'm like, absolutely no. Honestly, if you go to any reader, unless they have some other level of psychic ability where they can predict your death, you cannot see it in a palm reading when you are going to die, right? You can see your
Mhm.
energy, you can see what the energy you have throughout your life, but you see people who unfortunately pass very young and they have a very strong lifeline with no indication of accidents, and
Yeah.
it just happens. And I think that just goes to show that your fate's in your hands. You can read someone's palms one day, and the decisions that they make in the next year or two can completely change the trajectory of their life. So the way that I read readings after my experience of different types of readings throughout wherever I travel and wherever I've lived is I focus mainly on Western palmistry. That's the basis of my practice. And
Mm.
then, I'm sure there's little changes and tweaks here and there. I focus more on people's strengths and their abilities and what makes them uniquely them, because all of those things are going to affect their decisions that they make. And that's sort of
Yes.
how I frame it. If someone has a specific question about health, yes, I'll get into it, but I never start with health. I rarely bring it up, honestly, unless someone is coming to me for a health specific reading. And in that case, I'll only look at certain things. And I'll tell them very much with a grain of salt, I am not a doctor. I have no medical practice background. This is
Yes.
just from this study that I've learned. Because you don't know how that's going to affect their health down the road because they're going to worry about what you said. And you don't know what they've gone through on their health journey. And that's something that's really personal to me. I've dealt with a fair share of health concerns and things that have affected me. So if there's something that I know I've seen in my palm and I've seen it in other people's palms over and over again, I will bring it up. And one of those things that I think is different in my practice than some other people's, and probably like the only thing I'll bring up that's like, I don't want to say red flag, right? Maybe like a pink flag, I don't know, of hey, maybe if you've been dealing with this, you're not crazy, you're not wrong, right? Is autoimmune diseases.
Mm.
Because there are things on the palm that I found that can indicate that. And I know personally on a journey, I have celiac disease, and it took years and years to get diagnosed. And I know that that's a struggle for a lot of people to get the medical attention that they need in that case. And I'll just mention, like, is this something that has come up in your life? You don't have to share if it's, I'm like
Mhm.
very much like, I don't want this to be something that you feel like you need to share, but if this is something that you've been trying to get support with or something that you're concerned with, there is something indicating on your hand that it could be a concern, if not now, maybe down the road. So, it's always like a control of lifestyle or just continue to like live well, enjoy your life kind of message. It's never like watch out. But
Yes.
I do try to focus on just personal strengths. And then if there is something like that, I will bring it up health wise. Other than that, I always save love for last, and people get upset with me because they're like, well, I wanted to know about love, if you could bring that up. And for whatever reason, it's not my favorite thing to read about. I also feel like anything you say might affect people's decisions in the dating world.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot
But
of
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
I think I kind of went on a tangent there, but
No,
did I
no,
answer
no.
your question?
Yeah, you absolutely did.
There's a lot of ways you can look at it, but I think my practice, like the basis of my practice is your personal strengths and how you can use that to get to where you want to go. Um,
Yes.
and that is like the core of my practice and what makes me the happiest in sharing with others. And I find that people come to me to look for that as well. What about you? Is that like how is your
Same.
practice? Oh,
Yes,
wow.
it's actually very much
Love
that.
it.
So yeah, so
Oh,
for the
that makes
people
me
who are
happy.
listening, Paula and I have never really had a chance to really share how we read and what we do, even though we've known each other a little while now through Magic Market here in LA, and we've always sort of been palm readers at these events. And so it's so funny to hear you say this, and it makes me so happy, everything that you said, because yes, 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 yes. And it's all the same sort of thing that I try to teach my students in palm reading classes, which is I always want to make sure that people walk away feeling inspired and empowered.
Mhm.
And so how I read palms is more how I describe it when people sit down is it's less about predicting the future and it's more about figuring out what your personality is like and how you use your energy or don't and where you can redirect
Mhm.
that energy to maybe bring more attention to different areas in
Right.
your life depending on what's being reflected in the palm. So for example, I may be able to see like, okay, you're an extremely creative person, but right now you're dealing with a creative art block, which seems to have to do with maybe something that happened in your childhood that's coming back up again, or maybe there's something going on in regards to feeling like you can't put yourself out there in a way, and being
Mhm.
able to see all that in the hands so that way I can bring attention to it, bring it to the surface so that way people can have it in their conscious mind rather than subconscious, which is tends to be what happened. That tends to be what happens when people kind of put these things on the back burner and they're not 100% aware of it. And sometimes all they need is validation of
Right.
someone else sitting there being like, yeah, you're creative. You just gotta like raise your voice, things
Exactly.
like that. And so if I ever do see anything on the palm, one of my favorite things to point out actually is boundaries. I look for boundary markers on people's
Same.
hands, whether or not. It's always really fun because whenever I say, so your boundaries, people either start to wince or start to go, yeah, what about it? And I'm like, okay, here's the red flag. Yeah, but I always try to, even when it's like, okay, maybe this person doesn't have very good boundaries and maybe they're a people pleaser or maybe they have too tough of boundaries. I always try to do what I was taught in art school, which is the compliment sandwich. You give them the positive, you give them the hard pill to swallow, then you give them the positive again. So it's
Yeah,
balanced so they don't feel like they have no way to deal with the situation. And
I love that.
people should always be walking away
Mhm.
feeling like, oh, okay, this is something I can work on. And it's not a problem because now I feel empowered that I know I can do this and I know what to how to navigate it better. And this is something I believe with kind of like what you were talking about when it comes to, not being able to see in the palm that, oh, you're gonna die or whatever. I always tell people when they sit down, like, that is not something that I can see in your hand. And even if I could, it is not ethical to do so.
Exactly. Right.
Yes, and that goes for any kind of intuitive, psychic, divination work. I always tell other readers, like who are learning and putting themselves out there, that even if you see this, you should never tell somebody news like your loved one's going to die, you're going to die,
Yeah.
you're going to get pregnant, or you can't get pregnant. Like, there are readers who have no problem saying that,
Yeah.
and to each their own, but I personally don't think it's ethical. And there are ways to present that information
Right.
in a way that's not going to be harmful.
Hmm.
And that's what trauma-informed work is. So, for
Yes.
example, if you really, 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 really feel like somebody's loved one is going to pass, maybe you're into mediumship and you can sense like, oh my gosh, this person's loved one's going to pass. You don't say your dad's going to die. You say, hey, when was the last time you hung out with them? Like your other family members are kind of suggesting like spend some extra time with them. Like, oh, hey, like they want you to go visit. You know what I mean? There are
Right.
ways to present that info. And that's actually something that my mediumship teacher had happen where they told them in a very gentle way, like, hey, like when was the last time you hung out with that family member? Go spend time with them. And then like months later, this person returns saying, I'm so glad you said that in the reading because if you hadn't
Oh,
said that, I wouldn't have been able to go visit them before they ended up passing because of their sickness much, much, much later. So
yeah.
there are ways to handle these delicate situations that will not activate other people. Like
Right.
even how you were saying, and this is something I do in pet communication, how you were saying, I'm not a doctor. Take it with a grain of salt. Like
Yep.
I do the same thing in pet communication. I start every pet communication saying, I am not a vet. Take it with a grain of salt. If something concerns you, don't worry about it too much. Take it to your vet and ask them questions. And you don't have to
Exactly.
tell them that you talked to a pet psychic. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's the same with like speaking to your doctor. Like I am also someone who has a lot of medical issues. I have a chronic illness with chronic pain, and so I am also one of those readers that I will not, unless I am strongly, 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 strongly pushed and advised by my own spirit team, I will not make any kind of diagnosis because
Yeah.
that's, again, it's unethical and it's
Yeah.
also illegal.
Yeah.
But being able to gently be like, when was the last time you like talked to your doctor about
Yeah.
this? Like, my gut feels kind of weird. Have you talked to your doctor about that? Again,
Exactly.
framing it gently
Yeah.
and the gentle nudge because this work should never not be done with professional medical care if something comes up,
Exactly.
you should not be replacing your therapist for a palm reader. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, no, no.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you said all these things that I'm just like, yes, I'm vibing with it. I feel it. Same. I'm so happy because it like you said, it's also my goal to change the way that we as readers present this information and go forward and tell people what we're seeing, what we're sensing, what's coming through for us. So,
Hmm.
like I said, so people can walk away feeling empowered and feeling like they can, rather than having the sort of Damocles or storm cloud hanging over their head, like, oh God, it's going to happen any day now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I've definitely had readings where I walk away still think I currently am not going to say exactly what it is because I feel like that'll give it away to who told me this. But I had a reading, it was a trade at another event, and someone told me something that's still looming over my head. And I'm like, you know what? This was a reading. This was their choice to tell me something. We don't know if that's going to happen. My
Yeah.
choices may have shifted. I need to just
Yep.
let it go. And I think in being a reader, I understand that and understand the point of view of like, this is not the way I read, and that's the way they read, and that's it. And I need to
Yes.
just do what I can, put whatever protections up that I can, and that's it. Live my life. So
Yes.
yeah. And then
Exactly.
on the other hand, I have also I don't feel comfortable sharing anything about specific pregnancies. If someone comes to me about kids, I have my own way about going about that. But and I will not bring it up unless someone brings it up.
Yep.
It's very tricky. But someone did without me mentioning anything about me trying to get pregnant or have kids. And in meeting me, you would never assume that I was trying. I do events with my wife, and we're like, I don't know, on the younger end of LA family having people, you know.
Yeah.
So someone at an event was like, "Oh, I can see that you are." We did it was a tarot reading, and they said that I can see that you're in the next 3 to 6 months starting a family. Is that something that you're working on? And told me very specific steps of how it would happen, and it actually happened. So it was in a very agreeable way
Yeah.
that was shared with me. I feel like it was done very respectfully and really well, but I was honestly like stunned of how specific it was. So that it can happen with the right reader.
Yes.
That's just not me.
Yeah, yeah. No, same,
I'm not
same.
gonna provide those details, but
Yes.
some people might. So
Yes.
everyone is different.
No, exactly, exactly. And it's so funny that you say that that was your experience because right before I got married to my partner, I went to go get a reading and they told me I was going to get pregnant. And at the time, I didn't know I had endometriosis, which complicates pregnancies and makes it
Mhm.
very difficult. And if at all possible,
Yeah.
who knows? And at the time, I was so panicked about it. But I had told this reader, oh, well, we don't really want to have kids right now. We're not really talking about it, but we are going to adopt we do want to adopt a cat. Like we want to go like get a cat and that would be our baby. And they were adamant. They're like, no, your body is ready to have a child.
Oh,
And then here I find out
that's
like
tough.
only 2 or 3 years later that my body couldn't even process that. So
Yeah.
that kind of experience changed me to be like, okay, I want to make sure that especially if that information does come up and someone says no because of XYZ, you go with it. But
Yeah.
um, going back to kind of like what you were talking about, blending, which I feel like is what we've kind of been talking about, blending intuition with the reading. And it's so funny that you said that, when you were first starting out, it was very much to the book of like, here's what I've learned. This is what it means. Because I was the same way with tarot and palm reading, where it was like, this is what this means, and it has to be that all the time. It can't change
Yeah.
until I had an experience that changed that. But I'm curious for you, at what point did that shift? And how do you feel like you blend that intuition with what you know and have learned with palmistry?
I think in doing these events, like if I'm doing an event and I'm reading people back to back and I'm seeing a lot of similarities, usually when I work an event, even though no one knows each other, everyone has similarities in their hands. So there's like
Yeah.
themes of the week, of the day, of the
Yes.
weekend. It's so beautiful. And it's incredible to see this connection between people and they don't even know it, right? But you know it. And it feels like this
Yeah.
really special, like everything is going to be okay in the world feeling. But I think that in experiencing that back-to-back form of reading that I had not done previously, and that probably started, I want to say, like 5 years ago now. Um, that's kind of when everything shifted. I would say like within the first year of doing events like that, because I would get that connection with people and sit with them for
Hmm.
15, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, and go over all these things in their life and hear how something relates. Or like one example I think is sister lines on the hand, which are, spirit guides, loved ones, guardian angels, however you want to see it. And um, there were a few instances where I read specific spirit or sister lines and spirit guides and the timing in which maybe a specific entity came into someone's life, where they had explained to me that's the exact 2 to 3 year frame or same year same
Mm.
age that my very close relative passed, and I do feel like they're there with me. And I think that that spiritual connection, that spirit guide, that ancestral guide connection really inspired me to just trust my gut more. And in doing those events, it can be really exhausting. So I got really good advice from a reader very early on where I like would be falling asleep after an event and I would be so drained. And they were like, well, don't use your energy, trust your guides, trust your ancestors,
Yeah.
call on them. And so now that really powers me up when I do these events, and I really trust any sort of guidance that comes through, and take it that way. Like I don't feel like it comes from me, like it comes through me, but it
Yes.
definitely feels like this wild Filipino potluck party in my grandma's garden. Karaoke's going. We got the Mariah Carey high pitched everything. And so
Gosh.
it feels like this really positive, reaffirming energy and the same kind of energy I want
Yeah.
shining through in my readings where I feel comfortable to share that information. And it always comes from a good place. Like it's never intuitive where, someone's left wondering, like we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. It's always like if someone's really good at writing and they forgot, or
Yes. Yes.
someone's thinking of a career transition, but they don't know if they can do it. And you're like, well, here's all the places on your hand. And I have a really good feeling that you would do well on your own, or, you would
Yeah.
there is someone actually like down the road, like I can feel that there's this certain kind of energy that's coming your way, and I don't know when it's going to happen, and I'm not saying sit back and see what happens, but keep dating or like, keep
Yeah.
like, things like little things like that where it just feels like it's going to be okay almost. It's almost like
Yes.
that big family hug or coming through. It always feels like that. It feels like this warm hug or like a little chill and you're like, okay, nope, yep, this needs to be said. Something needs to come into this. So,
I love that so much. And I love that because you have this connection already to palmistry from your family that you're now kind of like calling on your ancestors, calling on that family to come through and assist you and charge up your readings and bring that family vibe that you were talking about. I love that because it becomes like a celebration of
it's
not
exactly.
only like you and your work, but a celebration of the person that's there who's receiving the
Hmm.
reading. And I try to tell people that too. Like this reading is not about me being right. It's about celebrating you and what you need right now. Like that's why we're here. So the fact that you're just like, yeah, it's like a celebration. It's like the family is all there, and I love that so much, and it resonates. I think that's so beautiful and like deep. Like one thing that I've been trying to do in my personal practice as a psychic witch, as I like to call myself, is really connect in with my ancestors and learning about them and finding ways that, maybe I didn't know that they practice certain things. And now I'm finding out, oh, well, I'm currently doing that and asking them for assistance and finding different ways to work with them. For me personally, one of the stories that I have specifically with like blending intuition with palm reading, one of the most memorable ones I have was one time someone had sat down for a reading and I was looking at their palms, and I could tell just based on what I know about palmistry alone that this person was extremely creative and they were very good with their words. But in my mind's eye, as I was seeing that on the palm, I saw their hands like close up playing a guitar. And
Wow.
and I was like struck and I was like, okay, do I trust myself and I just say it? Screw it. I'm just gonna say it. So I said, okay, do you play guitar or an instrument? And they said, actually, yeah, I do play guitar. And I was like, okay, there it is. So yeah, after that, I really learned to trust those like random intuitive insights that come through because, you
Hmm.
know, sometimes I'll look at the hand and I'll see a certain marker where I'm like, okay, I know logically that means this, but an emotion will arise, or I'll think of my own personal memory, which makes me think, okay, there's some sort of connection here.
Yes.
And once I started allowing that intuitive, the psychic senses to really play a role, to blend with the reading of what I already learned, I noticed that my readings got a lot deeper, and the people I was reading for ended up responding like really positively because it became
Mm.
so much more personal for them as well. And so this is also something that I like to teach a lot of people is, it's beautiful being a researcher. I am a book nerd. I was also one of those kids, like you said, the book fairs. Oh my gosh, I was so excited for book fairs as a
We
kid.
would have been fighting over the bookmarks.
We totally, I love it. And like, I love, 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 love reading. I have so many books that I haven't even read yet. But also knowing to trust yourself and
Yeah.
knowing to ask for assistance from your spirit team, whether that's ancestors or guides or angels or whoever you work with,
Hmm.
and knowing that they'll bring additional layer. So, you've baked the cake, they bring the icing on
Hmm.
top. You know what I mean?
I love the
And
food example because that's my favorite kind of example.
I'm so into food. My partner even points that out. He's like, you have to make everything like an example about food. So I'm
It's
glad
like
you resonate.
cupcakes or
Yes.
pizza or
Oh my gosh.
something. Oh
Yes.
yeah, I'm with you.
I love it. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, and I know you've kind of mentioned it already with like people sit down and they're like, oh my gosh, can you see when I'm gonna die? Because I get that all the time too. But are
Hmm.
there any misconceptions about palmistry that you would like to dispel?
That's a good question. So dispel. So that's one of them is the when am I gonna die?
Yeah.
And then the that your hands don't change, like, oh, this is set in stone. That's a
Yes.
huge one. And then another one that I think is really something that I get sometimes that, again, this is a specific kind of way someone reads, and I'm not saying that it's incorrect. It's just not the form of palmistry that I practice. I
Hmm.
believe that this is more common in Vedic palmistry. Don't quote me on that. I might be incorrect, but this is my understanding is reading the left hand for women and reading the right hand for men. I don't know if
Mm.
anyone's ever asked you like, well, why aren't you reading my left hand or why aren't you reading my right hand?
Hmm.
So that's not personally how I practice. There are people who practice like that, but I am not a believer of the binary, and so I don't
Yes.
practice like that. I
Yes.
personally do left hand is what you're born with, right hand is what you make of it, and that's kind of how I explain that. That's a huge one for me is reading palms as if you are sitting in front of me as a man or a woman.
Yeah.
I like to blank slate your person. And I'm reading your palm, and I don't want
Yes.
to assume that you can have children. I don't want to assume you
Yes.
want to get married.
Yes.
I leave it as, I don't call marriage lines. I call them
Same.
attachment lines, or relationship lines,
Hmm.
because you don't know who's sitting in front of you. I know that trauma-informed readings are so important to you, and
Yeah.
without labeling it the same way, I think I practice a lot of that just naturally because of
Yeah.
my personal experiences. And so I don't want someone to sit down and I don't want to assume in doing a love reading for them that they're going to fall in love because maybe they don't believe in falling in love, or maybe they don't believe in monogamy, right? Like maybe they
Yeah.
like, because traditionally you can read attachment lines and it might look like you're having an affair, but maybe you have a third, right? Or
Hmm.
maybe it looks like you're marrying three times, but that's not the case. You just have very long, intimate relationships and you learn a lot from each of them. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they end poorly. So I think that there's a lot of assumption that happens in traditional palmistry teaching, that you would find in books. And that's why at the beginning I was like, take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
You'll meet the people that you meet, and it's for me personally, I never assume that how someone might present is how they're feeling internally. So I just like to read people as they're a person. And I think that's my biggest, besides the death, besides I think kids is another one.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also in like reading someone like they're a person and not a baby making machine, right? Like a woman is not
Yes.
to have kids all the time. And if they want to, they'll share with you and ask for your personal input on that. But I don't believe that's my place to just tell people. Um, and what else? Health stuff. Again, the only thing I'll mention is like, I don't want someone to keep going on this medical journey and like not feel
Yeah.
validated in some way. So if I feel called to share something, I will, but very rarely.
Yep. Same.
Um, I think that's all of it. But I think my biggest like ick lately is like reading for binary.
Yes. Same.
Like I
It's so
just don't.
frustrating.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't want to assume. And there have been times where like I sit down for a reading and in my mind I'm like, okay, well like this is definitely like me doing a reading for some man. And then like throughout the reading I find out that they're trans, right? And so it's like that respect of like your life has changed, or like sometimes all like your life has changed, the way that you present yourself has changed. That obviously has been like that will affect your hand of like how you could have lived versus like you coming out and transitioning, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you'll see the something in my practice that I've noticed, and I don't know if you've ever gotten this, is like people have like two lifelines,
Yeah.
and and sometimes I'm more sensitive in reading this now because of a few instances. Sometimes people have two lifelines because it's just like extra, I don't know, like strength in their life, and they like live, like I don't know, they're like a athlete or like a super strong person, and like I find that's rarely the case, but sometimes it like when I read that it feels like people have like a double life where they're able to be one way with their family
Yeah.
and one way without their family, right? And maybe that's not what that person wants to sit and talk about in their reading. So why bring it up? Like maybe it's a sore point and it's not going to help them or help you know, make them feel inspired or confident when they leave. So I kind of see where the reading takes us and go from there. And if I feel like there's somewhere that they can shine more or something that might benefit them in this sort of like two-pathed way that they're living their life, then absolutely I'll say something. But yeah,
Yes.
a lot of
Same.
a lot of
Same
different
to
ways.
all of it. Yes, exactly.
Anything different from what I said
Oh my
that
gosh.
like
I mean, I am 100% like on board exactly the same. I have a big issue with like gendered ways of reading things and how exclusionary that can be to so many people. And I'm so tired of the binary, to be honest.
yeah.
Like, please.
Yeah, or
And
like
so,
being femme presenting, like I'm
yeah,
gay and like being femme presenting, sometimes I sit for readings and people assume that I have a husband.
yeah,
And
yep,
I just let
yep.
them talk because I'm like,
Oh
what's the
gosh, no.
I'm not going to correct you here, but
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, no. And I have so many friends who are non-binary, and I hear about their struggles, and just I always think of them whenever I'm in these situations, and I that's why I teach a lot of people like, you know, this whole idea of masculine and feminine, like no, it's BS. It's
Thank
more
you.
of yeah, it's more of this idea of like for example, one of the really old um, things that I see in a lot of books are Venusian hands are usually found on women and because of Venus and it's someone who is very tender
Oh,
and motherly versus someone who has like a strong mount of Mars and Mars is very masculine and they're very
yeah.
aggressive. It's like no, if we're looking at planetary energies, we're not looking at them as male, female, masculine, feminine. We're looking at them more of caretaker versus like the fighter. And that
Yeah.
doesn't have to be gendered. Like that is my biggest issue. It doesn't have to be gendered
No.
to say like you're somebody who is assertive and likes to put themselves out there and is very like confident in yourself and is willing to fight for your values versus you're someone who wants to take care of people because you love people who are just people and you want to support people. Like you don't have to be one way or the other to have those
No.
qualities.
I
And
have the perfect example of that
yeah.
actually with it's funny you bring that up with Venus and Mars. My wife is a Venus Mars combo, like her mounts on her hand. And when I see that, my little nickname for it, I have like all these, if you've had a reading with me, I have cute nicknames for everything and it's ridiculous. Like there's no point of it, but
I love
I
it.
for me, it's how I remember things. Like being an art history person, I always come up with weird ways to remember paintings and dates. And so I did the same thing with palmistry. Unfortunately, for some people, they hear this. But tough teddy bear is my favorite like nickname. Is like for that Mars and Venus, they can be combined. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And it's like
Yep.
you can stand up for someone and care for them and
Yes.
it's like you're like this tough teddy bear who wants to just
Yes.
like nurture and love and like stand up for you and fight for you all in the same. And like there's no one way, you know?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
every archetype has multiple sides, you know?
Multifaceted archetypes.
Multifaceted, yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that is what it means to be human, period.
Yes, yes.
So exactly.
Mic
And
drop for Jenny.
yes. And then the other thing you had said was about like palms change, and that it's never set in stone. And I also have to tell people that at the beginning of the readings, our palms actually regenerate skin the fastest. So I believe it's 6 to 8 months, the skin will regenerate on our palms, and that's why the lines change so frequently on a like very physical level. And that's why they
Hmm.
take your fingerprints, because your fingerprints won't change, but your palms do.
Yeah,
And so that's why I tell people like what I see right now will be completely different a year from now, not just because your skin regenerates faster, but because of what life throws at you, what you
right.
choose to do or don't do will all be reflected. And then the other
Exactly.
thing that you had mentioned was the two different hands. And this is something I get asked all the time when someone
Hmm.
sits down, they're like, "Do you just need to look at one hand?"
Yeah.
And how I read is I do look at both hands. Except for how I read it is whatever hand is your dominant hand is how you put yourself out into the world. Whatever hand is
Ah.
your non-dominant hand is your like private life or your subconscious.
Hmm.
So like doing the errands, running around and taking care of business, how people at work or school would know you versus how your family and your friends would know you and your goals and your values at heart. And
Hmm.
so for me, I use both hands to be like, who are you on deeper levels, on the surface, on the inside? And if you're ambidextrous, here's a little trick that I like to do to trick people. When I say, "Oh, which hand's your dominant?" and they're like, "Oh, I don't know," and I'm like, "Okay," and then I'll like kind of toss a pen at them and see what hand goes.
That's so smart. I love that.
Or I'll be
Like
like,
you
"Hey, can you
didn't know it
grab
was
that
going to
for
be a
me?" Yeah,
test.
no, exactly. And then they're like, "Oh, oh," and I'm like, "Okay, so we're gonna use that one, the one that you reached with."
Yeah.
Like I always tell people, whatever hand you instinctively reach with or want to throw a ball or catch something, that is because that's your natural reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are times where like the lines will match on both hands. And I tell people, well, that's, for example, if your heart line, how I read that is how you express your emotions.
Yeah.
So if your heart line is the same on both hands, then how I read it just means that you are who you are. You wear your heart on your sleeve. You don't try to mask your emotions. What you see is what you get.
Hmm.
You know? And that's how
Yeah.
I personally read. So I I love hearing how you read and your values around it and where you come from. And it's just been so amazing to hear all of your stories. And I'm curious, um, you had talked a little bit about having your palms read. Do you have a memorable palm reading experience or a fun memory of something that you learned? This could be either you getting your palms read or you giving a reading to someone, something that just like really hit and is like, wow, I will never forget this reading that either you had or that you gave.
It's really tough. That's it, because I don't have one specific one. There's so many beautiful stories that happen within readings that I really love. But I think this is I think this is more generally than like one specific story.
Mm,
But when I started doing readings professionally, a lot of it was during the pandemic online virtually. And so I was either doing PDF format readings and I was never meeting someone face to face, or I was doing Zoom readings. So I wasn't in markets meeting people face to face. And in that period of time, a lot of people were just feeling really lost, and not knowing what direction to go in, career transitions, having difficulty in relationships, adjusting to a new normal. People were just, in general, going to readers for guidance and trying to figure out what's next for them and what fits best. And I think in that period of time where people felt so lost and so low, what was really beautiful is just reminding someone of something that they are really good at or something that they did, or just reading their palm and hearing like or seeing like a little light bulb, go off. One specific one was a someone who closed their shop down during the pandemic,
mm,
and it just things were not working out, and it was a partnership with someone, and so they decided to go separate ways and close the shop down, and they were kind of in between things at home with their family, figuring it out. And I had said, well, did your shop have anything to do with this other creative side of you? Like, you would be an excellent writer. I see that you'd be really good at communicating with your words. And they were like, actually, I went to school for like English, and I think it was like
mm,
English and journalism, or like I was a writer, and then I opened my shop, and I honestly completely forgot that was an option for me. And so they started writing again. And in that reading, we also talked about, political involvement,
mm.
and like, lobbying and all of that stuff. And
Yes.
they were Mars archetype. And I was like, I feel like you would be really great being boots on the ground in your community and just reaffirming what they already knew, right? And
Hmm.
they had
Hmm.
agreed. I'd been thinking about this, and we are Instagram friends now. And I just follow the journey of this person really blossoming in things that they completely forgot that they already knew about themselves. Like they already knew. and it was just a conversation to remember. And
Yes.
I think that was one of my favorites. It wasn't like one of those, like, I feel like when you think of, I don't know, like at first when you said memorable reading, I was like, there's not one where I'm like in tears or, it's like a
Yeah,
huge shock, or
yeah.
there have been readings like that, but I feel like just a reading like that,
Yeah.
those types of readings are the best readings to me, because the most memorable readings, not the best readings, but the most memorable readings, because you're just helping someone find themselves again. Like
Yes.
they might have like stepped off the path, right? But they were always there. And
Yes.
um and people are always amazed at what's on the hand. They're like, "You don't know me. How do you know?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I'm not coming up with it out of nowhere. You can see it here. Let me show you," and
Exactly.
that's so great. That's so great. I love that about palmistry. I think that's what
Same.
makes it a little bit different than some other practices.
Absolutely. And you're so right. It is literally just shining a light on them. And
Yeah.
like I said earlier, it's celebrating them and being like, remember who you are. This was always here. You
Hmm.
always had this in you. I'm just a reminder,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm literally just highlighting the page. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's very sweet whenever people say like that, oh my gosh, how do you know that about me? Or like, oh, I hadn't considered that. And or oh, I had been thinking about that, but I didn't really like know that I needed to hear it from somebody else. And I always tell people it's not that I'm like putting something in front of you that you didn't already know. I'm
Yeah.
just bringing your awareness back to it and hopefully bringing that person back to center so they can go, oh, right, this is me,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Oh,
Right.
I love that. And before we wrap up, is there any advice that you would give to someone who is interested in learning palmistry and diving into the lines on their hands?
Um, I would say do your own research. Really look at who you're learning from. There's resources everywhere now, right? There's books. They might be hard to find in bookstores, but you can look up, favorite books. One of my favorites, if you're really planning on, if you've kind of dabbled and you were like, I really love palmistry, I want to learn. One of my favorites is The Arts and Science of Palmistry, I think. I might be something like that. The Arts and Sciences of Palmistry. It's an Ellen Goldberg book. It's like a textbook. And
Mm,
that one's been my favorite. It's like my go-to. But really understand who you're learning from so you know what to take from them, I think is one of my big pieces of advice. You're on TikTok way more than I am. And so I'm sure you see all kinds of things about palmistry on TikTok that are
hmm.
wildly absurd, that are just honestly they're wrong. It's not even the way someone practices. I think it's for shock value on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so I get a lot of those questions now in readings, and I'm like, just be mindful of who you're watching. Don't just let the videos go and like that must be fact, right? Fact
Yes.
check through your own research. Don't be afraid to order books. Go to a bookstore and sit down with a coffee, and
Yes.
and just learn. And then also, if you have willing volunteers, it's harder to read yourself. So if you're having a hard time because you're practicing on yourself, it's because it's really hard to read yourself, like with
Yep.
any practice.
Yep.
So if you have a willing volunteer who knows that you're learning and you've got your training wheels on, that's always really helpful. And someone who's just willing to sit and be practice with you, and be open with you to do that. I think it's a lot easier,
Yeah.
personally. So if you have someone, if you're not, if you're not in the broom closet and you have someone that's willing to practice with you, I know that's a privilege for some people, but go for that. I think that that's the easiest way to do it. And then if you have local classes, I feel like from what I've seen, people who teach like Jenny, and I hopefully will have some classes this summer once I sit down and
Yes.
figure it out. Again, it's been some time, but hopefully they're coming. If you have a reader that you trust, that you've been following online or that you see locally,
Yeah.
wherever you are, that's always really helpful, because sometimes classes are participatory, where like that's how mine are. I'm not sure how you have yours, Jenny, but I like to sort of have people sit at a table and we do a palm print. And then people with their neighbor can see how their hands differ from their neighbors. And so
Yes.
for that reason alone, doing a class is fun because you see how different people's hands are. And I think it's just really inspiring, and you don't feel so alone in the practice.
Yes, I love that you do the prints. My teacher did that as well, doing the
It's
ink
tough.
prints.
I was
It's
scared to
yeah,
start. Yeah.
it's a little scary at first. But yeah, I do the same thing with my classes, which is why I have yet to teach it online. I have ideas of how I can do it, but I just
It's
love
tough.
it is. I love having people in person so that way, I tell them, "Okay, here's what this is. Now I want you all to get into groups and then have a discussion, look at each other's hands, look at your
I
hands, look
love
at their
that.
hands," right? Like it brings kind of that like community together and I completely agree with like everything you were saying, especially about like making sure you know who you're learning from, making sure you know where you're getting your stuff from. And anyone who's listened to the podcast knows that I always talk about discernment. Use your discernment. Why are people selling this to you? Why are they telling this to you? Where did they get that info from? What do they get out of sharing that with you? Asking questions, critical thinking, and as we talked about earlier, and as you've mentioned, like taking things with a grain of salt with older texts and using your own personal judgment based on your values and your own discernment of what resonates, what feels ethical, and what feels like it, resonates with my personal values, and what can I leave behind that no longer suits me and where I am and where the world currently is. And
Hmm.
you know, uh,
Well
one of
said.
the other things I like to tell people is learn from as many people as possible, especially in palm reading, because we're all so different. There's no one way to do it. And so
Hmm.
I have definitely like in my palm reading classes, I tell them about you and I'm like, go look at Paula. Like go
Same. I'm
like
like, well, Jenny, if I
yeah,
like at events too, I'm like, well, Jenny is
same.
right there.
Yep, yep. I do the same thing. I list off all the different teachers that I know of, even people that I may not have personally been taught by, or maybe I
Mhm.
haven't gotten a reading from them, but I agree with a lot of their personal way that they read that maybe I don't read that way. But I'll
Yeah.
always provide that to people because I want people to be informed and I want people to be able to explore multiple avenues and learn from different people of different backgrounds because how you read and your background with palmistry is different than mine, even though there's a lot of crossover and we agree on
Hmm.
a lot of values and ethics,
Right.
but you're going to get something different every time.
Hmm.
So, with all that being said, oh my gosh, this has been such a treat and such a pleasure for me personally. Like, I feel like this is more for me than the
Same.
listener, but
No, I feel like as vendor friends, we never get to connect, and that's
yes,
something I'm trying to do more of this year. So I'm so happy you had me on your podcast, and we had an opportunity to learn a little bit about each other's practices because I've been sending people your way for years now. So,
same,
but this
same.
is good. I mean, I
Finally, we
already
get to
knew
talk.
that you were
Yes.
great, but
I
it's
feel the
good to
same
hear.
exact way. I know. It's so nice to be able to be like, yes, 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 I agree. Oh my gosh, samesies. So I would love for people to be able to find you and go explore your offerings, get a reading from you, keep an eye out for whatever you've got going on. So what do you have going on and where can people find you?
Sure. So this year I will be at events. You can see my most current event coming up, any of them on Instagram. And aside from events, I you can book readings with me online. I typically have my online availability on my website, pisforpalmistry.com. Very easy. Everything is P is for palmistry. So on Instagram, it's P dot is for palmistry. Instagram and my website are the best ways to kind of see what's coming up next. And then in the fall, I believe you can pre-order wherever you can find books. I have a book coming out that's actually a palmistry book for kids. It's like a
Oh,
kid's how-to, and it's sort of like, sorry if you can hear Charlie is like, yes, the book. My dog is in the background.
cute.
But it's In Your Hands, A Kid's Guide to Palmistry is sort of like this homage to me trying to learn palmistry as a kid for all the kids out there who are trying
Oh
to
my
learn.
gosh.
But it's for kids of all ages. Honestly, I feel like anyone picking up this book, it's very approachable and a fun way to see it with beautiful illustrations by Alyssa Marie through Moondust Press, who's publishing the book. So that'll be out in the fall. You can pre-order the book again anywhere, which is exciting to say. Um, And yeah, that's pretty much it. Classes will be coming up sometime this summer. I would love to do a summer session of classes in person in the LA area. And then I'm trying, like you, I'm trying to figure out an online way because my fellowship started everywhere online and not just in LA. So I want to include everyone. So
Yeah.
hopefully that'll be coming soon as well. And that's everything.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, definitely listener, keep an eye out for that book. That sounds amazing. I feel like I know some people who would absolutely be so excited to get that for their
Oh.
kid, and I can't wait to check it out myself. And again, thank you so much, Paula, for coming and sharing your
Thank you.
beautiful wisdom, your beautiful story, your beautiful energy, and it has just been such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. I can't
Of
wait
course.
to see all the other episodes coming up as well. I'm really excited. You've been doing such a great job with everything.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully, we'll get to chat with you again. I would love to continue because I feel like we could keep talking for so long.
Yes, for sure. We'll get coffee.
Yes, definitely. All right, thanks.